Welcome to the Arena Decklist Podcast. I'm Gerry Thompson, joined once again by Bryan Gottlieb. Took a little week off last week, had some travel woes, and now you are coming to us from New Zealand.
What's up, mate?
Oh, God. No.
That's the word. That's the word I picked up.
I was going to ask if at some point you're going to develop an accent. Now, I don't think accents ever ruin anything, right? It's just like net positive.
Agreed. Love accents.
But you already have a very good podcasting voice.
Yeah, but I don't know. Some of my favorite voices to listen to have like an accent. I find it very aesthetically pleasing, particularly soothing in a lot of instances. So right. I think if I develop a New Zealand accent, it's not the end of the world. I think it'll only improve my podcasting voice.
It's not the end of the world. Like I said, I don't think they ruin anything. The only thing is I like how you are now.
I appreciate that. Yeah, that means a lot to me.
Yeah, I mean, obviously improvements could be made on anything. I don't know if it's your voice, though. Your voice is really good.
Okay. I'll keep that in mind as I slowly work New Zealand words into my vernacular. And maybe I'll try and add some of my original flair to them. I won't pick up the New Zealand pronunciation. I'll just mispronounce them like I do all the English words. So.
Yes. And magic cards.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so Kiwis. The New Zealand people are referred to as Kiwis, yes?
Yes.
Okay. And this is not a derogatory term. This is a thing that they call themselves.
Yeah. I mean, I definitely hear them reference themselves as that. If it is derogatory, not my intention whatsoever. I'm just trying to, repeat what I've heard them use.
Okay. I'm just trying to get some things clear.
Yep.
The land down under is Australia, but does New Zealand count as that?
One thing I am quickly learning about New Zealanders is that they really like to separate their identity from Australia. I think that's important to them that they not be lumped in with Australia. So obviously, New Zealand on the same side of the globe, I don't think they're referred to as the land down under.
Well, so Australia is the land down under, but is New Zealand down under? You know what I mean? It's not the land, but it's in the same general vicinity as the down under area.
It is. Again, I haven't completed my citizenship test yet, so I don't think I'm qualified to answer this.
Okay. I've been very close to just kind of shorthand referring to Bryan as being down under or whatever, because it's pretty easy to do. And then I was wait, no, I gotta make sure that I'm not messing this up, because I don't want anyone to read into that oh, you said he's in Australia or whatever, when I clearly know that that's not the case.
Yeah, I think it would be read that way. I'm pretty sure.
I know.
Some experts, I know we have fans in both Australia and New Zealand. They can weigh in for us and let us know exactly how we're supposed to define down under. And
I know that they're different, right? And I know that they are separate places, both with pros and cons and everything. I'm just saying that down under could be a bigger area than just Australia. I don't know. But
I think the whole, I mean, I don't know, this goes into globe theory, but obviously there's some problem with referring to things as down under when the globe is
right.
A sphere, right? We've set it up in a very clear, this is on top, this is on bottom way. So.
Or, when you believe the earth is flat, then it just gets really weird.
Look, I don't even know how to communicate with those people, so I'll let them live in their own world.
I have such a good flat earth story.
Well, now you have to share it. There's no way you get away with this one.
All right, so Michael Majors and Tom Ross
are flat earthers. Yes, everyone knows that.
Not quite. They're funny dudes with their own sense of humor. And for a while, living in Roanoke and then also in Seattle, they were palling around a lot, were drinking buddies, would go play NBA Jam together, go to arcades and shoot hoops together and stuff. Not actual basketball, but the random arcade basketball games. Mm-hmm. And just created their own sayings and phrases and adopted each other's and whatnot. And one of them just became sky blue, grass green for this is obvious or whatever. And then somehow I think it was Tom Ross added earth flat.
Oh, that's good. Yeah. Very smooth.
So it added another layer of complexity to it. So then I think at SCG-Con, when there was the snowstorm and we all got locked in the lobby for an extra day or whatever, he may have casually mentioned this, and Tappy Toe Claws, who is like a legit scientist, was just like, what? Like,
just in fear.
no, just like, excuse me, what did you say?
Hmm.
And he's just like, sky blue, grass green, earth flat. It just kind of went from there. It led to her at like 3 a.m. just being like, okay, look, dude, and just explaining the science behind why the earth is not flat on cardboard wall because they made a pizza fort. We're inside the pizza fort. And she's just doing like diagrams and drawings on the walls of pizza boxes with a Sharpie for hours. And Tom just sat there and took it all.
Yeah. Excellent. That's the only response you can do at that point.
Right. It's like, you don't know what you signed up for, but you're here now.
Mm-hmm.
And as soon as Tappy busted out the Sharpie, I was just like, I'm out of here. I did not sign up for this class. Like,
you saw where things were going. Yeah, good read.
So sky blue, grass green, earth flat, etc.
Yes.
What else? Okay, no accent.
No.
Kiwis are good. No down under.
Yeah, I think so.
You're there to work on Flesh and Blood.
Yeah. I've been grinding out some future stuff for Flesh and Blood, which will obviously remain tightly under wraps. But I am very excited for everyone to experience it 20 years from now. It's going to be awesome.
This is the first time in game design.
Yeah. So like, obviously, like I worked on Neon Dynasty, and something about like I was only involved in the process very late, and like more of like QA checker, I would say is more akin to my role. But I'm very deep in this one. The wait is going to be excruciating. I can already feel it.
It's a lot because you're in design, like actual hardcore, like starting from scratch design, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep. That is what I'm doing over here.
It just determines so much for what a set is going to look like. And you can look at any Magic set and be like, well, you know, the devs messed up like this, like here and there, like these little minute details or whatever. But I think, especially for the last years, it's like, wow, design has really been on point. Like this world is great. The set feels very evocative of that sort of thing and those themes and everything. And I think that people are really enjoying that aspect.
I agree.
And yeah, thankfully Magic has not had many points where you just like look at the set and it's like the devs couldn't solve this. It was a design problem, right? But like, you know that everything starts there.
Yeah, definitely the foundational point. And, now working with the devs very closely who are incredible. Like basically everyone in New Zealand is incredible, just doing an awesome job of like making me feel extremely included, extremely welcome, extremely comfortable, working around my still weird sleep schedule. It is 5 a.m. as we record this right now in New Zealand.
Okay.
So it's just been a really awesome experience. And I hope the only like cherry you could put on top is that what we eventually produce, everyone just loves. Like that's the most important thing. So hopefully that is the case 20 years from now.
I have faith, man. I think that you'll do a good job, and I have faith in the team too. So
I do too. Things are going very well thus far. So people who love Flesh and Blood should be excited for the future.
Awesome. And I don't know what the time frame is, like a year and a half, 2 years, something like that. It's going to feel like an eternity, I'm sure. But
yep, yes, it is.
We'll get there.
Yep. It's funny. Like as I get older, things come upon me sooner than I expect. Like I just like turn around and I'm like, oh, this felt like it was going to be forever. And then these things I'm waiting for are here. So I expect this will probably follow suit.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. Life comes at you quick. It's all determined by how
flat the earth is, right?
Yeah, how flat the earth is, of course. But just like how occupied your time is, right?
True. And it has been very occupied recently. So
yeah.
I'm sure.
Yeah, I mean, you're kind of doing like a crunch thing, basically. Like you're working a lot. And
yeah,
I know you like it, but
yeah, no, I do love it. Definitely putting in a lot of hours. But it's funny. It's not like you'll work until this is done. It is, all right, I do my work for the day. And then I like go do something else. And next thing I know, there's an idea in my head. And I'm like, well, man, I really want to follow this idea through. And then it's 6 hours later. And it's just like, chasing down one thread. So it's both like the curse of and the benefit of doing something you love. But I think fellow ADHD people know how like the interest spikes go where you're passionate about something. For me, I find it's best to just lean into it. And then after that, I'll do the self-care thing. I'll make sure I put some time to just refresh, recharge my batteries. I'd rather work in sprints than just like this monotonous slog of 8-hour days, you know?
No, that's completely fair. And I mean, if you, as an ADHD person, just kind of like trip and fall into a flow state, yeah,
You
just
got to
lean
go with
into it.
it. Yeah, because I mean, at some point there will be like a week stretch where I'm like, I can't do anything. I'm worthless,
Right.
and like, I may as well get ahead of it now. You know.
Yours only lasts a week, huh?
Hopefully, that's being an optimist.
Mine kind of lasts decades. So
Yeah, I mean, I had a few decade ones, and
yeah,
since then they've tend to flow more. I would say months is the more applicable time cycle most of the time, but we'll see. We'll see what we do this go around.
yeah. Dude, I'm stoked, and I'm happy that regardless of the outcome, although I do think the outcome is going to be good, that you are getting to work on something you love.
Yeah.
Like that is just kind of the dream. And yeah, maybe took a few more hours on an airplane than you would like to be able to get to do that.
There's
But
there's a direct flight from New York starting in September. And if you had told me at the start of this year, like a huge quality of life buff for me was going to be when there's a direct flight from New York to New Zealand, I really wouldn't have understood what you were talking about.
that's
But
pretty incredible, actually.
yeah, it's going to be a huge difference maker. My flight back, which I leave about a week from today, has 4 stops: Fiji, San Francisco, LAX, then back to New York.
You have to go from SF to LAX, really?
Yep.
Come
Yes, I
on,
do.
come on.
Yeah, it's crazy. It was like actually challenging to find a flight out of New Zealand. I don't know if New Zealanders are just traveling a bunch, or it's winter here right now. Although I would take this winter. This is like good Seattle weather, basically, like
Yeah,
rain at night, but basically 70 degrees during the day. So I would take this winter very happily.
dude, that's perfect.
Yeah, but I think New
That's hoodie
Zealanders
weather,
are.
man. Let's go.
Exactly. I've worn a hoodie every day since I've been here. But yeah, I think probably more New Zealanders leaving, and it was tough just to get out, basically. So take what you can get.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully with them having a direct flight to New York, then it's also not impossible to get back because I don't know.
Should be
Presumably,
should just be able to hop on the same flight theoretically. I mean, we'll
I
see how popular the flight is and how hard it is to get a seat. But
yeah, I would hope so. It's just like I don't know if New York is going to run to New Zealand and back, or if it's like, well, we put the plane in New Zealand so that we can then go to like Fiji, SF,
yeah,
LAX,
I
and things
actually
like
don't know that. That's a fair point. My assumption is that it goes both ways. Yeah, I think it does because I know the folks here are excited about it as well. So that would
Okay,
make sense.
awesome. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
I gotta imagine it's like a pretty good vacation spot or whatever.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I think like so I've mostly just been in the city proper. Obviously, like I lean towards nature, but I've also spent a bunch of time living in cities, and I appreciate a good city. And Auckland seems like a very cool city. There's a lot of good stuff here. Definitely like reminds me a lot of Los Angeles in a lot of ways. Like very sprawling. The high rise section is pretty self contained, like really, really cool places, really good vibes all over the place. So I've been impressed.
Things I did in New Zealand that you may or may not be interested in. And granted,
Hmm.
this was like 14 years ago.
Yeah,
Visited black sand beaches,
definitely want to do that at some point.
cool as hell.
Yeah.
Other thing was bungee jumped off a bridge.
Yeah, so we were actually talking about this the other day. Bungee jumping was invented in New Zealand, I guess.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, so it's like a big thing here, and then they do the bungee jump off the bridge. There's a spot in Auckland where they also do bungee jumping off the bridge. Did you do it? Were you in Auckland or are you
Yeah,
elsewhere?
yeah,
Yeah,
that's where I was.
yeah, it was probably the bridge we were talking about. Yeah, and it's named after the creator of the bungee jump.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I maybe they told us that and I didn't remember it. I feel like that's
Because you
something I
were
would remember.
terrified about to jump off a bridge. That would make sense.
No, it was Luis who was the one who was terrified.
Okay, I would be terrified. You weren't terrified to jump off the bridge.
Nah,
Just like
like
a lot of faith in your safety equipment, right?
no, it's just like what's the worst that happens? I die. Okay,
Okay. When you put it that way, I guess that's fair.
then then
Um,
then what? I'm just asleep.
yeah, good nap.
Yeah,
That's
I
that's a
don't
good
know.
way of looking at it.
It was me, Paul Chion, and Luis Scott Vargas, and we were all like, "This sounds fun. It's probably going to be terrifying." And then they have to bring you to the place, teach you some stuff, get your gear on, and then they have to walk you through like the undercarriage of the bridge.
Okay.
Because obviously you're not jumping from like where the cars are.
Yeah,
right?
of course.
And also it has to be the undercarriage so that like if for some reason you snap back up super hard,
you don't hit the undercarriage.
Right. Yeah. So then we're like, I don't know, just like climbing through the undercarriage of the bridge where there's, you know, like walkways and stuff, but it's like humans are not really supposed to be here. It feels like,
Yeah.
But then we get to the place and it's like, it's all set up. It looks good. There's all these people. And I don't remember who went first or whatever, but obviously like the fear and anxiety was creeping up on us, like the closer we got. And then it's just like, you get to the edge and you look down. It's like, that's scary as hell.
Might do it to me. Yeah.
And just like as Luis got closer to the edge, I could just see him like backing off more and more. We both had to like kind of like nudge him and be like, come on, dude, like we're here. Let's do this. Right.
Yeah.
And it was fun. It was awesome. Absolutely awesome.
Now, the actual process of like doing the bungee jump, you just jump, right? Like there's no, is there anything you actually have to do while you're flying through the air?
No. It's like they could just like nudge you off the side and everything would work out okay.
Yep. That's my expectation.
And it's like you go down really fast, you kind of spring back up a couple times, they reel you back up, everything's good. So it's just like that split second of falling is the entire experience.
Yeah. I don't love heights. I wouldn't say I go to like complete fear. I can sometimes do things like on a ladder, but I don't love it. So I don't know what my response would be to bungee jumping. It was funny when I went to Costa Rica to play the GP, you know, we explored a bunch and I was with my wife and my brother, and we went 4 hours outside of the city proper to go to Manuel Antonio National Park, which is an incredible place. I really recommend everyone go there. But we did like a zip lining course when we were there, and I've
been zip lining. That's super fun too.
Yeah, well, yeah, it was. But we're all like getting up and we're getting our zip line gear, and I'm like, man, I fucking hate heights. Why did I do this? And then my brother's like, I also hate heights. And Janelle's like, yeah, heights are terrible. And we're all just standing on top of these platforms. And none of us had any idea why we signed up for it. Ultimately did have a good time, though. It was fun.
Good.
Yeah, it was just like the moments where you were standing on the platforms. Because the platforms in Costa Rica, we were just like they were just like nailed into giant trees. And they're like, by the way, don't touch the trees. This is where the bullet ants live. And the bullet ant, if you don't know, is like the most painful sting in the entire animal kingdom.
Okay.
Like a crippling bite if they bite you.
I did not know that.
Yep. So you didn't touch the trees and you were just kind of like standing on these rickety platforms. And that was really the scarier moment than like the zip lining.
I don't remember the specifics of the time that I went, but I don't feel like there were a ton of heights involved. It was mostly like, you hike up to the top of this mountain or wherever the hell we were. I don't even remember where we were.
And then you just like one ride down?
No, it's just like you go kind of like from peak to peak, sort of like slowly down the hill, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. We were going like platform to platform where the platforms were built into trees.
Yeah, that's less ideal, I think, certainly if you're scared of heights.
Yes. Yes, it was.
Word. All right. So as you may or may not know, there is a Magic Arena PTQ this week that is Explorer.
So you tell me that, and that is why I know.
And I am qualified because I was able to camp on my Mythic limited rating. Whee!
Pretty exciting, and also very timely because, as you may have guessed, given the 20 minutes of story we just told, I don't really know what's going on in Magic. I don't see any reason to lie to anyone. I've been very focused elsewhere. But I think because you are so dedicated right now, just playing a bunch, learning a bunch, I think we could still put on a really good show. And you can kind of teach me, bring me up to speed. So when you eventually take down this qualifier weekend, I know exactly why you succeeded.
Well, I'm going to be honest. For the last week or so, I've been playing Marvel Snap.
Oh, okay. So we're both terrible.
No, it hasn't been 24/7, thankfully. I mean, I have woven in some time to talk about and play and think about Magic, and Josh Joe has been keeping me occupied because
also qualified, right?
He is qualified now because he 7-0'd whatever XO is in LCQ last weekend, the best of
Nice.
one. So we had been talking about decks and like trying to get him prepped and ready and everything. And I think that is going well so far. Even remember when we did like the Shadow versus Omnath, like post Luris ban?
Yep.
Like those sessions are really good and really fun, and I learn a lot, right? Just like playing 2 matchups, trying to figure out, how to either construct your deck or like build a sideboard or how to sideboard and stuff like that. And Josh and I carved out some time, and he was like, look, like this deck is really good in best of ones, but I don't like it against this other deck. Like, and I was just like, well, okay, I'm going to look at a bunch of lists. So I did a bunch of research, looked at what other people were doing, thought about the matchup, just kind of like holistically. This is with me playing 0 sides of both matchups, right? I mean, I've played the decks historically, right? But not these current iterations like in Explorer or whatever. And just being like, I'm pretty sure, knowing what I know, this sort of plan is going to be your best bet. Like it's these 8 cards, blah, 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 whatever. And we test the matchup. I'm playing the side that he is not favored against, and he just mopped the floor with me.
Nice.
So, and it was just like all the cards like came into play and like did work. And I was just like, yep, still got it. Like I can very clearly eyeball some of these things as long as I have frames of reference, which I did. So got to sit down and actually figure out that matchup, which was his main concern for like playing the best of 3 qualifier thing. And I think that went well. I mean, now there are like doubts creeping in. I think whenever you are testing for a tournament, and especially when the tournament is like 3 weeks out, when you start testing, is like you figure out something that you like, but as time goes on, you start to notice kind of like the little things that maybe you wouldn't have noticed if you only had 4 days.
Yep.
And there's also this whole weird thing about just Arena and sort of Explorer in general, and also who's playing in PTQs. And we've talked about this before, where it's like the ladder metagame never really resembles what the PTQ field is. Maybe for day 2, but it's not true on day 1. Like day 1 PTQs, I have traditionally just played against the most random stuff, which can be to your benefit, but absolutely can be to your detriment too, depending on.
This feels like it should be especially true in the Explorer format, where it's kind of new. There's not really a set metagame, and I don't think it's not going to be most people who are qualified for this event. It's not going to be their primary way of playing Arena, is my guess. So that means, you have to kind of put together a deck on the fly that maybe you don't have some of the pieces for. So you got to start asking the question, what's cheap? What is low wild card investment? Like, I think that will be a large portion of the metagame. You should, maybe it doesn't make the best deck or the most played deck, but it makes the deck that you have very, very increased odds of facing.
Yeah, and that's where Josh and I started with his collection, because prior to Streets, he was brand new to Arena. So
right.
Streets got him a ton of wild cards because he just played.
Because he's playing limited.
Yeah, he played limited.
Look, and there's no question when
you're
when you're crushing limited. There's no question like Arena gets pretty cheap. You can definitely finance a good collection on the back of being a good limited player, no doubt.
And the frustrating thing about it was from the no limited side of things. Like I know how precious all the wild cards are, right? And he had I think like 120 rares and 40 or 50 mythics or something. And so he's like, well, I'll just build this. And I'm like, slow down.
Like, please save those.
Slow down. And it works sometimes, but it doesn't work all the time, especially when we're not on Discord together. He's just like, well, I crafted this deck, 30 rares down the drain or whatever.
Yep.
So we started with Rakdos Sacrifice because it was relatively cheap, and he already wanted some constructed deck to jam on ladder for like wins and quests and stuff like that. So he had already built like Rakdos for standard, so he had like pathways and whatnot. So then porting it then to Explorer was not that bad, because like a lot of the key cards are just commons and uncommons, like Cat, Oven, Mayhem Devil, etc. But the mana base now is, they actually give you like pathways, like one of each pathway to start in the intro decks, which I like a lot. I think is a great idea.
Yep.
And then it was like, well, get some blood crypts, but then a lot of the rest of the mana bases are like, well, you play, some Den of the Bugbears, a Hive of the Eye Tyrant, a Takanuma, and a Sekenzin, and it's just like, all right, dude, like don't craft Sekenzen Takanuma. Like you just don't need them. They are value adds, and just skimp and save on the wildcards wherever you can.
Yeah,
Um,
I guess when you're trying to do like this quasi free to play mode, like get your baseline and then figure out exactly what you need to play the tournaments that matter, and that's when you invest your wild cards.
right. Yeah, I mean, part of it was him just trying to figure out a deck and get reps with it so that he could be prepared because he hasn't really played Magic in like 2 years.
Right.
So, he had to start somewhere, and he would prefer that it was early. So, Rakdos is where he started. That's not where he is now, but in his eyes, he still has wild cards to burn. So, I was like, well, what about this deck? And he was like, no, like deck is garbage. Play against it. It always looks bad. And then 10 minutes later, he's like, yeah, I crafted it and I'm never losing. So I'm just like, God. All right. Anyway, I think what you're saying about there not being like a set metagame was true maybe a couple weeks ago, but I think it's fairly solid now in that Explorer and Pioneer kind of have the same problems. Again, stuff that I've talked about before where people just find like the most messed up thing that they can possibly do that's on one end of the spectrum. And the format basically revolves around those decks. And Pioneer was like that for a while. And people eventually figured out ways where they could succeed with things like mid-range or whatever. And I think Explorer is kind of getting to that point, but it still has a lot of the same problems. So I'm going to run down the problems for you.
Love to hear problems.
Luca and Indomitable Creativity are legal. And a lot of good token makers. Careful something. The Neo card that cycles to make an elf.
Yeah. I don't know the name either, but definitely a card that I had an eye on.
Yeah, I keep wanting to say careful consideration, but I know that card. That card is a blue card.
Yep.
But it's careful something. It's like that thing channels to make an elf. There's Courier's Briefcase, which is awesome because it also just enables turn 3 transmog, which is great.
Yep. Very scary.
And so the Luca decks have mostly settled into like a Gruul shell, occasionally with some splashes, and then they just do Titan of Industry stuff because Titan of Industry beats up on a lot of things that exist in the format. So previously Agent of Treachery, but this deck, if it's just like, well, I'm only like transmogging once, like is an Agent of Treachery actually going to win me the game? Probably not. Like you probably need like creativity for 2 or 3 in order for that to be that good, right? So there are Jeskai creativity decks that use Agent, and then there are Green-Red X Luca Titan decks. So those
what are they doing with the middle of their plan? Are they like solidly mid-range and just good Gruul threats in the mid game and then simultaneously threatening this Titan of Industry end game?
Well, you can't really do threats, right? Because it messes up with like Transmog and Luca.
Right.
So you have some amount of removal, Fire Prophecy, like, puts a Titan back into your deck, or you can play a Braid or Voltage Surge because you have some random treasures. Fable of the Mirror Breaker is just the card for these decks because like, I guess that's what you're
literal
talking about,
everything.
Like,
yeah.
Mid-range threat, right?
Yep.
Gets a thing, accelerates you, filters through your medium cards, finds you more combo pieces, whatever. And then Luca, and then you can just cast the Titan.
I love when these decks are presenting multiple game plans. Like when they go all in on just like, I make this thing, what are you going to do about it? I'm like, kill it. Good game. Like I'm glad
I'll figure it out. I'll find the Rest in Peace or whatever sideboard hammer.
Yeah, that's what I always hated about the creativity decks that were just like putting Sarah's Emissary into play or something like that. It's like eventually, like this works sometimes. It's not going to work all the time, and this is all you do. You don't have anything else to offer. So hearing that they've moved to not necessarily a split game plan, but a little bit more versatility. Fable of the Mirror Breaker, just doing all the things has to be a huge get for them. This deck sounds like it would actually be right up my alley. Like I really like this playstyle.
It's pretty nice. And then some of the decks are splashing for like Thoughtseize or slightly better removal in Fatal Push and stuff. And you can definitely do that and get away with it. And I think that's pretty easy. It just all depends on what kind of problems you're trying to solve. And then
I'm assuming some decks probably also go to blue as well that are trying to get like counter spells and interact with metagame that way.
Yeah. I mean, if you think that Mystical Dispute or Negate or Disdainful Stroke is like the better disruption card, then you can absolutely do that.
So what happens when you find a good 2-color shell is you get to just get the disruption that you feel like you need.
Yeah. The Jeskai decks are a little stranger because, like, for the Gruul decks, there were a couple people that were like, I am doing really well on ladder. And then, like, that deck gets copied because it was relatively new. But, like, for the Jeskai decks, there have been so many iterations and so many different formats over just, the past few years that people haven't really solidified on the single best list. Like, some of them still have Fires of Invention, which I think is really powerful. But I think that most people have moved away from, and that's also true of like the green red decks, where a lot of them I think started with fires and then we're just like, no, I can just cut this. It's fine. So the Jeskai decks are weird. Some of them are a little bit more all in on the combo. Some of them are a little bit more controlling and are playing kind of like a half and half. And then you'll see like the occasional fires decks. And then it's like, do you play Urian or not? Or any sort of companion, whatever. And it's all kind of split. So it's really hard to narrow those down, but they're all kind of trying to do the same thing.
Right. That makes sense.
The other part of the messed up spectrum is Greasefang.
Yeah. So
Bryan,
this is a deck that I think just gets better and better as time goes on. The Greasefang builds I'm seeing now are like night and day from the original ones.
Yes. So Bryan, who worked on Neo, what the hell, man? You missed Greasefang Parhelion in specifically Pioneer? What the hell?
Yup. Just yup. I didn't think about that. I mean, I can't tell you whether that was something that was being discussed internally, but it didn't even cross my mind. Not for a second.
Yeah, I think...
Sorry.
Cards like Parhelion, it's like they're there and they exist, and if I'm drafting the format, I'm like mad because I see it occasionally, or I open it in my sealed deck or whatever, and maybe the format's too fast for it to be a playable card, and then after that, I just purge it from my memory. It's like it never existed.
It's weird. I probably did. One of the things when like a card like Greasefang exists and you're trying to validate it, I do just a ton of gatherer searches.
Yeah.
Well, let's be real, Scryfall searches, and figure out exactly what this is doing. So it wouldn't shock me if at some point I was like, oh, you could do this. But did it register as like, oh, this is going to be one of the biggest threats in Pioneer? I don't think so. And it wasn't, in fairness. Like it was weird. It was there, but until it really got these new pieces that solidified its game plan, I don't think it was much of a threat. Now I do very much think it's a threat.
Yeah, because even at the time, I know that when we're doing previews for the set and like talking about Fable of the Mirror Breaker, right? It was just like, this does a lot of stuff, but like, where does it go? And the answer was everywhere and also in other formats. But I don't get the feeling that you had that opinion also while like working on dev for the set.
Nope. Generally, I didn't hone in on the idea of the sagas being individually powerful because I thought they were broadly powerful. And once you decided to take the risk on the sagas, I think like this was always going to be the end result. Was it going to be Fable of the Mirror Breaker? I didn't really even think about that. It was going to be something. Something was going to be good enough and generate too much value. Could Fable of the Mirror Breaker have been taken down a notch? Probably, but also at the same time, while it has become ubiquitous, it's become playable across multiple formats. I don't think it's ruined format. Like it's not like an Omnath or like an Oko or like that style card. It's just
it's
very
not even
good.
A Tarmogoyf,
no, it's just very good and like in a bunch of places and like maybe actually inspiring the type of magic you want to inspire. So that's why like when I was looking for things, I wasn't looking for cards like good cards are allowed. That's completely fine. And Fable of the Mirror Breaker being good is acceptable. The only risk I saw with that card was systemic and putting more, quasi adventures into the format, not really an individual risk.
Right. And I mean, we both felt that way and made it a point to talk about basically all of the sagas because it was like, all right, how much value does this thing give you? And a lot of them have shown up, maybe not in huge numbers, mostly because just like the color doesn't really support it all that well, or the format isn't conducive to it, or they're just like better things to be doing. But like Fable is definitely the one that sticks out, right? And then once you get that into the mix with Greasefang, and it's like, okay, well now you kind of have this backup plan. You're not pigeonholed into being all in on the combo if you're the Mardu version. The Esper version is a little bit different, but Mardu does have this weird kind of like, I'm just going to attack you with like Blood Tithe Harvester and my Goblin token backup plan, which is not great, but it's something.
Yeah, it can be threatening. Like I don't think it is going to win many games, but does it change behavior in games? I think the answer to that is absolutely. And that's just as critical. Whenever you play these like half combo, half mid-range decks, it's not that you necessarily have to win with your mid-range plan. It's just that it needs to get some consideration, get some resources from your opponent, and when it does that, it opens the door for your big finishers. So.
Right. It's the Splinter Twin thing where it's like, well, eventually they're gonna have to like kill your goblin or kill your reflection of Kiki Jiki or whatever, and then maybe your Grease Fang that you draw sticks.
Yeah. That sometimes that's all you need is a lightning rod.
Yep. And for Esper, a little bit more all in. A lot of draw and discard type of stuff because you basically need to find both Grease Fang and Parhelion, which is not that easy. And that takes up a lot of deck slots. You don't have a lot of space left for other stuff. I've seen some lists that are playing the White Black Sorin that has like -X reanimate and X mana value thing, and Kaito, and some were playing like Elspeth Resplendent. And it's like, I think that yes, I guess that's a backup plan, but it's pretty bad. And if you're trying to do Esper stuff, I would just stick to the combo. All in.
Yeah. I think so. I think Esper has the tools to make that solid. In general, I think you know where my affinities lie. I love split game plans. I love offering multiple threats. So in general, I do like the Mardu builds a little bit better, but the Esper stuff is acceptable as well. I just think you need to identify the metagame a little bit more, find some softness to the Parhelion combo, and then you can really benefit from going all in with Esper.
Yep. Other end of the spectrum, sacrifice decks, Cat Oven, either Trail or Oni Cult Anvil. All things that are very difficult to deal with. Boo. Yes, absolutely boo.
I just don't. I don't know. I've said this for a while now. I don't know what games Cat Oven makes better.
None.
I never want to play with it. I never want to play against it. It's just a mistake. And if you gave me the keys to the Castle Vantress, I would just get rid of it all over the place. So.
Yep. Just unprint Eldraine. I think it's fine.
Yeah. We could get rid of all of it. I don't think anything I'd really miss.
Problem with sacrifice decks is that they're a little small ball. It's like hard to deal with, but they have a pretty like long clock, right? What's the opposite of a short clock? A big clock? That's not even true.
No.
It kills on like turn 7.
Anemic. A pretty anemic clock.
Yeah. I would say. So things like Luca into a Titan of Industry, I mean, that'll beat you a lot of the time. It's really hard to overcome that because Titan kills you quick and, gains some life and has trample and everything. So it's tough to block with Cat. They're kind of in a tough spot. They can play a bunch of spot removal stuff to maybe disrupt the combo. Usually you get to disrupt it like once, but they're all transmogrifies and Lucas. And like I said, eventually they can just hardcast the Titan too. So I would much rather be on the Lucas side of that matchup. For Jeskai, maybe it's a little bit different. But again, they have the option to creativity for like 3, which makes things tough. But then they have Agent, which still might not beat you if you have like a Cat and an Oven and a Devil and an Anvil. You have a lot of stuff going on. They can't take it all, right? So,
yeah, I want to jump you forward to something that I expect like you are definitely going to talk about.
Okay.
What do you think? We talked earlier about like the cheap deck, the thing that gets people in and lets them participate if they aren't dedicated Explorer players. What do you think that is offhand?
I mean, from Josh's experience, it was sacrifice. I don't know if that holds true if you didn't also have the pathways from Standard or whatever.
Okay.
There might be something cheaper, but I do feel like almost all of these decks are like half rares. So even mono red is just like a lot of the cards are rares, depending on what version you play, I guess.
Okay. Well, one of the things I was going to posit was like, I expect the cheap thing to be like fairly creature combat centric. Just for whatever reason, it tends to work out that way.
Right.
Obviously, that's the scenario in which Cat Oven shines. So if there is like something for this deck to exploit in the new metagame, it might just be people who are finding their way to the format. Of course, if this is just the cheap deck, that sort of throws that into a tailspin and maybe just makes it a flat out bad choice, despite all my frustrations with the combination here.
Yeah, I mean, well, sacrifice, regardless, is still pretty cheap, even compared to the aggro decks, I think.
Mm-hmm.
in terms of wildcard economy. So, and you can also make concessions around that too. Like I said, don't play Takanuma, don't play Sekenzen, it's fine.
Yep.
But if you have some of the mono red cards from formats past or some of the Angel stuff, not all, but yeah, there have definitely been games watching Josh play with Sacrifice where it's like, oh, opponent's playing mono red. Well, this is going to be close, but ultimately I'm going to win, right? And same thing with like mono blue spirits. But then there are decks like Angels or even just like a more all-in green-white life gain deck that somehow people are playing, but doesn't seem to win very much, just like a Johnny's Pridemates and Soul Wardens and whatnot, where it's just a terrible matchup for Sacrifice. So like that's where the randomness aspect of it comes into play, and it just starts seeming like maybe this is a bad choice. But I do think that there is commonality between Greasefang and the Transmogrify or Creativity decks, where like spot removal, instant speed spot removal especially, is still pretty good because there's the creature decks in the format, and then there are the combo decks that rely on creatures, as long as your instant speed card is like ideally 1 mana and can kill Greasefang, which is
Fatal Push.
Like, yeah, Push does it sometimes. But we don't have fetches, right? It's like Fable Passive.
Yeah, but when you have Cat Oven, it's like
if you have Cat Oven, it's a lot easier. Absolutely. Yeah. Or a treasure from your Goblin token or whatever. You know, like there are ways to make it happen. But I think if I were to play Sacrifice, I would play just like a little bit more spot removal, and then that also kind of shores you up against Soul Warden deck.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And then Fight Rigging is another one that is not great, but is pretty frustrating to play against.
Very cool idea. As soon as I saw these decks, I got immediately excited. Why are they not great? Do they just not line up well with like basically Titan of Industry and Greasefang Parhelion going larger than what they can do, despite it being fairly large?
Right, and it's relatively inconsistent too. Like you only have the Fight Riggings, and I mean your backup plan is turn 2, Rotting Regisaur or Shakedown Heavy or whatever, which is not bad. But
not bad.
Then your thing that's both like a secondary combo piece and a good thing to hit off Fight Rigging is the Great Henge, which I think normally is not a card that you would try and play in this format because it doesn't really line up well against anyone. So
yeah, again, like talking about Cat Oven picking up some spot removal, it seems like the underbelly of this deck, Cat Oven is particularly well set up to deal with. And then if you just have some spot removal for the Titan of Industry, for the Great Henge, you're in a pretty good position against them. So
yeah, but it is really tough to kill those cards. I mean, by spot removal, I'm talking like, you know, Voltage Surge on top of Fatal Push, not playing Kolagon's Command, Bedevil type of stuff.
Yeah.
The Titan might also just end up with a shield, so you might be screwed anyway.
That is true. Fair point.
Yeah, depending on what they need to do. It's not that uncommon for them to have to like gain life and make a 4/4, and then like, okay, you kill the 7/7, now they have a 4/4 that they can just transmog the next turn and run it back. So yeah, Luca also like having 5 loyalty and just getting to do it twice works really nice with Titan.
Yeah, for sure.
So the things that I'm hearing from Josh were basically like, a lot of my good matchups are disappearing. I'm not seeing a lot of aggro decks. It's like a lot of combo and a lot of control because control is actually decent. Like March of Otherworldly Light is a removal spell that can be cheap. And when you're talking about like, well, I just need to kill this Greasefang and then their whole plan falls apart, like you don't care about pitching it to Farrier or whatever, right?
Yep.
And then actually get to play some reasonable counter spells. So I think that blue-white control is solid. And I know that people are still messing around with like Torrential Gearhulk stuff and I don't know, whatever. I think that sort of endgame kind of like doesn't beat anyone because even just the creature combo decks like go over the top of you. So I would not be messing with it. I would just be like full control, like Bryan Gottlieb, like
we're just Teferi tucking. That's it.
Yeah, like a Castle Vantris or a Castle Ardenvale, the good one.
Man, I'm having a good time working down here, but when you tell me there's like a viable Teferi control deck that just doesn't even want to win the game, I might have to quit so I can get in some reps in this format.
Yeah, the thing is like Dream Trawler might just be good enough against most things to play main deck, but you don't have to. You don't have to, man. It's fine.
Disappointing. Well, regardless of what I'm supposed to do, I will just sit there, win with Teferi. I mean, not for very long. I'll play one game and be like, okay, I did it. I've
Yep.
got my kicks in, and then I will walk away. And that's a real decision when you're playing on Arena because I don't know, you can't kind of like just give your opponent the look like, hey, we're done here. Do you want to try and win the second game, or do you want to sit here for all 50 minutes?
And then they hear you and they just start roping.
Mm.
They just go AFK. They're like, time to make a sandwich or whatever.
Yep.
And then you just concede because it's a ladder game and you're in silver, so who cares?
That is you have perfectly forecasted what my experience is going to be, actually.
Dude, we've lived the same experience.
Yes.
That's the only reason I know.
Yep.
The funny thing about this is when Explorer started, the first deck I built was Phoenix.
Yeah, just not in the mix anymore.
I mean, it's okay, but it's not doing anything particularly well. It has a bunch of spot removal that you could play, which is cool. A lot of it is sorcery speed, but you could get away from that if you wanted to. If you wanted to play like Lightning Axe and Flame Blessed Bolt and not play Strangle, you could absolutely do that, and I think that would be fine. But yeah, no DRC or Thing in the Ice or anything from like Pioneer and Historic. You have Ledger Shredder, which is cool. Your Expressive Iterations just got banned, which is kind of a feel bad.
Yeah, big hit.
But yeah, again, like the clock is just like a little bit slow, so you can disrupt them a little bit, and then they're going to start doing this stuff that is, 4 mana for a 7-drop or whatever. They're basically just like cheating things into play, and you're like casting Crackling Drake or whatever. It's just not great.
Yeah, it feels like we're supposed to wait for Thing in the Ice, basically. That is such a good catch-up mechanism against all these strategies. It actually gives you reasonable outs to play towards, and like also a clock. Like it increases your clock for sure. So while Ledger Shredder is great, I think some aspects of the Phoenix archetype are just sort of indispensable, and Thing in the Ice stands out as one, at least in the Pioneer format.
So listening to what Josh was saying about what the metagame looks now made me think about the stuff that we were talking about before and the stuff that I've said in the past, where it's like the PTQ metagame is going to be completely different than what you've seen in the last week, or like the days leading up to the tournament or whatever. So I don't know then like how to gauge things or what advice to give really. I mean, like the best advice is like pick a really messed up thing to do and just work on it. And just try to have game against most things. Try to have plans against things. Hedge where you can. If there is a matchup that you feel is pretty close to unlosable, then that's fine. Whatever. Just, like scoop that matchup. Don't necessarily devote the 8 cards or whatever you think you would need to beat it and just move on. But if you wanted to just work on Mardu Greasefang, I think you could absolutely do that. I think that probably moving to more of a mid-range plan might be better because I think a lot of the thought seizes and spot removal stuff just like line up pretty well against what the format's doing anyway. And then you get away from pretty mopey cards like Stitcher Supplier that I don't even think should be in the deck in the first place.
Cool. All right. So you don't want to give advice, which is fine. I respect that.
I can give advice. My confidence level is just low.
Yeah. So what I was going to say is that like, knowing when you don't have like the correct answer, I think is valuable as a content creator because you can say, I don't have the correct answer. Don't just blindly copy this, do your thing, which you have now done. But at the same time, people want to know what you are going to play. Like where does that leave you ultimately? And I know you're not trying to save any information. So tell us what you're going to play.
Well, there's one last deck to discuss that I think is pretty good.
Good.
And that's Rakdos Midrange with one of our most hated cards, which is Graveyard Trespasser.
Oh no, you're a Graveyard Truther. I leave for New Zealand for 1 week and I come back and you're all about Graveyard Trespasser.
Okay. Let me just say that it's actually not bad in the context of the format. That said, I'm not sure if my list would include it or not.
Okay.
But spot removal, Thoughtseize, reasonable threats, not going like super small ball with Young Pyromancer. Doing
so
stuff
what are we talking beyond Graveyard Trespasser as far as threats go?
Fable, Chandra, Sorin, some Croxes.
Okay. Yep.
Bone Crusher Giant is great, and you.
Yeah.
I don't know. You could play Arcanist if you want. I think that's like a little bit too small bally, but like Blood Tithe Harvester obviously plays both roles pretty well. So yeah, I think it's mostly Blood Tithe, Bone Crusher, and then people have the Trespassers and Fables.
Seems like a good solid base for sure. I think Bone Crusher Giant, given everything you have described thus far in the format, Bone Crusher Giant seems just great.
Yeah, it doesn't kill Greasefang, but hopefully your other stuff makes up for that.
Right.
But maybe that means that you don't play 4. You know, maybe you play like 3 copies or something. I think that's completely reasonable. But
man, adventures and sagas in the same deck. Talk about just getting the most out of your cards.
Weird, right? And Planeswalkers. So I'm fine with playing Rakdos. Things I will caution against is that I think people are really used to like the standard mana bases where you have all Shocklands and basics, and like your Dragon Skull Summit's always ETB untapped and whatnot. So you see these lists with like a bunch of summits and like Castle Lochthwain, and I love Castle Lochthwain, right? Like
too.
that would be basically my win condition if I could do it in any deck, right? Where it's just like you just grind them out and then Lochthwain them to death. But like in this deck, I honestly might not even play it because of how wildly inconsistent it is. And then you also need to take a hard look at your Takenuma or any Sekenzans you're playing. And it's just like, is this actually better than a basic swamp? Because it's not free anymore.
That's really interesting. You know, one of the good signs I think of great deck builders restraint, like just because you can do these things, you have to ask yourself, is it actually correct to? And one of the hardest swaps to make in all of Magic is like basic land for anything. And it's just like a very like disciplined swap that shows usually a very good understanding of the format.
Or land in the sideboard too. In a lot of
that's another one. Yep.
I kind of learned this the hard way, honestly. I built this Bant Blink deck when everyone was playing like Jeskai Blink. They're like blinking Avalanche Riders. And it's like, okay, that's cute, but like if you just blink Mystic Snake, you win the game, right? Like people just can't play Magic anymore. You're talking about playing against like Solar Flare, just like these clunky Kakusho decks.
Yeah, I remember the format well. I was a Solar Flare player until I remembered just not winning anymore.
Right.
Because people didn't let you do the 6-mana sorcery thing.
Yeah, and the Solar Flare loved playing the Karus, the bounce lands, to fuel compulsive research and get to 6 mana, and they worked really well with signets and everything. And for that Nationals, I convinced Cedric Phillips to just cut his Karus because he was just going to get obliterated by the Blink decks because they had things like Venser and Riftwind Cloudskate, you know? Mm-hmm. So I was on top of stuff, mostly. Comes down to me playing for top 8 against a Rakdos aggro deck where I'm Wall of Roots Tarmogoyf and can blink life gain cards, you know? It's like pretty good matchup, all things considered. And I like they have Magus of the Moon in their sideboard, right? Which is pretty tough because I have a lot of green and I have Wall of Roots, so I can make green mana. That's not that big of a deal. But the majority of my mana base was like Shocklands and then Flagstones of Trocare because I have Edge of Autumn because I didn't have many ways to put cards in the graveyard. So like I could either ramp with Edge into Snake or Venser, or I could cycle Edge off Flagstones to pump my Tarmogoyf. And only played 3 Tarmogoyfs because that's how hard it was to get cards in the graveyard, right? But yeah, they had sideboard Magus of the Moon. It was really good against me. I had Serrated Arrows in my sideboard to kill the Magus of the Moon. So I thought maybe not a big deal. And because my very boisterous, very loud roommate, Gabe Walls, at the time was running around telling everyone how like busted our deck was, and someone was like, oh, you just get Magus of the Moon. He's like, we have 4 Serrated Arrows, idiot. Anthony Noderosa playing for top 8 against me played Magus of the Moon. I played Arrows and he Shattering Spreed it.
Yep, that'll do it. Just
brought in Shattering Spree against my deck with no main deck targets because Gabe told him I had Arrows. And the thing I learned was that the 2 Yavimaya Coasts I had in my mana base to like solidify my color requirements or whatever, it was just like completely unnecessary. And if it was like, you know, basic island, basic plains or whatever, it's like I'm pretty sure I just win the match pretty easily.
Yep.
So
yeah, it's a tough lesson to learn for sure.
Stuff like that. You don't always have to play non-basics just because they're available. And, you know, things like Pioneer, obviously they have a lot of really good options for you in if you want to like fix your mana or whatever, but it's like Haunted Ridge, Dragon Skull Summit, Castle Lochthwain, they all have costs, and Takenuma does too, because some of your other cards are keying off of basic lands. So it does matter, and you do have to think about that stuff. And I can already like look at a deck list and just be like, this person probably did not put that much thought into it, or is not paying attention to the amount of games that they lose because of it. And you and I kind of have an ongoing thing with this. Maybe it's just like me sending you things and then you indulging me and you don't really care. But all the Phoenix decks playing for Stormcarved Ghost, just like automatically.
Yeah, my favorite response is no way to prevent this. There's nothing you could have done as people lose game after game because their codes come into play tapped.
I mean, especially in Historic where you have like DRC and they're playing the Symmetry Sage, the like Magecraft, make a thing a 3/3 or whatever. It's like you have all these 1-mana cards, right? And you have Shocklands and Pathways and Spire Bluff Canals in Historic and everything. And it's just like you have so many ways to just fix your mana on turn 1 that for Stormcarved Coast is kind of ridiculous. People were doing the same thing with Sulphur Falls when that was out. It was like, yeah, we'll just play 4 Sulphur Falls and like 2 basics. And it's like, that thing is never going to need to be untapped, right? You can just cut 2. You still have completely adequate mana sources. And yeah, just watching like the last Pro Tour playing Historic, like there's a feature match where a person had 4 Stormcarved Coasts in their deck, had it on turn 1, lost the mirror match because of it, because they weren't able to play Magic on turn 1. And it's just like, come on, just like tighten up, fix your mana base a little bit.
Oh, like we said, one of the hardest shifts to make. It is not always patently obvious, but after some deep thought, you can often find it. And the fact that those are the type of adjustments you're making to your deck at this point tells me that you have definitely put in the work on this format and understand it well.
I'm in there, you know, I kind of know what's going on, but it's
so I assume
funny.
you'll have like a deck list for our lovely patrons over in our Discord, right?
I mean, I have a lot of different,
Gerald?
I have a lot of different deck lists, and then I think it's up to you to choose what you want.
That's fair. I think that's a fine approach. Just, you know, these are all viable options. Use what you'd like.
I was like smart enough in 2009 or whenever this Nationals was to be like, all right, Cedric, you need to cut your crews. You know, like I just need you to do this. Like cut your crews, add a 26 land or whatever. And Cedric also lost playing for top 8, by the way. Like, he went pretty deep and loved Solar Flare as a result of that tournament and a few tournaments surrounding it. And it's like not a very Cedric deck, right? It's like black-white mid-range effectively. Although I guess he did play black-white mid-range when I was playing green-white tokens, which also kind of weirded me out. But anyway, I was pretty smart back then. And I thought that the Serrated Arrows had me covered, and it mostly did, if not for Blabbermouth Roommate. But I could have been better, and I learned something that day. Like, it hit me hard, right? And I think that I know more stuff now as a result of that. I don't think that I'm perfect. I'm still learning stuff all the time, right? But, like, this is one of those things that I just see constantly that I want people to be more mindful of, and just encourage them, like gentle, helpful nudge towards, you know, thinking about your mana base a little bit. And I think the cop out for a lot of people is like, mana bases are hard. Like I'll just copy one or whatever, but it's like, learn to do it.
What if I gave you a new catchphrase? We know my catchphrase. If it's free, it's me. And I would like to pass on a catchphrase to you. And it is, perfect mana bases are not perfect. It's deep. It sounds like it's a contradiction, but you actually dig into it. And the idea of having these perfect, you know, you play all your Stormcarved Coasts. So things are
20 dual lands.
Yep.
Wow.
Perfect mana bases are not perfect.
The way I referred to it was my mana was too good at that Nationals.
Yeah.
So very much the same thing. It's like, did I need the 19th and 21st blue or green source from the Yavimaya Coast? No, I didn't. Also, taking damage kind of sucks, right? Like, what the hell was I doing?
That's what the game's about.
Yeah. I don't know. I think maybe I just had like one game where I couldn't cast a Venser or something, but it's like, it would have been an island.
Here come the Yavimaya Coast.
Yeah, it would have been an island, man. What the hell? I think Rakdos is fine. I think that Blue-White Control is fine if that's what you want to do. I am not the person to get a list from that from whatever. Nassif has been streaming it. You can definitely check him out. I think Carmen posted a list. Mardu Greasefang is good. I would get rid of Stitcher Supplier. And just recognize that you are not going to combo on turn 3 every game. Like, that is not necessarily your plan. You're playing Mardu midrange that happens to have a combo.
And you're blessed to do so, by the way. One of the best positions you could be in.
Yeah. And it makes people sideboard all wonky against you, you know? They're going to load up on like Hearse and Rest in Pieces and stuff, and hopefully you're just not using your graveyard anymore. You just don't care. And then if what Josh is saying is true, and the metagame does actually resemble kind of what people are doing on ladder, then I think Spirits is actually a good choice. Like, if there's not a lot of aggro and the counter spells are pretty good, okay. You know, the reaction to the combo decks is playing Control. Okay, play Spirits. Like, it honestly sounds pretty good to me.
Yeah, this is sort of like the Mystic Snake deck, right? Like, people are trying to do these very specific things, and you just disrupt them very well while you present a good clock.
Yeah, I won't say the clock is good, but it is a clock.
A clock? A clock?
It is a clock. And it's pretty similar to the problems that Sacrifice and, you know, like Angels and Phoenix all kind of have, where it's like they're goldfishing at a solid turn 6, turn 7, right? But they have the disruption to back it up, and they have Curious Obsession to keep drawing cards, and you actually have a lot of good sideboard options now, which you didn't before. So between Ether Gust, Mystical Dispute, whatever, Witness Protection, if you want that, you have answers to kind of everything, and it does feel like you have access to an actual sideboard now, whereas you didn't before.
Yeah, a lot of like very innocuous cards have come into the mix as good blue sideboard options. So not shocked to see Spirits pick up some metagame percentage that way.
And if you just want to pick a deck and jam, I think you could stick with the normal Mardu Greasefang deck. I think you could just jam that. You could do Esper if you want a full-on combo. I would full-on combo. Do not play the Mopey Planeswalkers. You have Ledger Shredder as a backup plan. That is fine. And then you can sideboard in something else if you want to. You know, Blue-White Control is fine. Mono Red is fine. Gruul, Luca, Tyrant decks are also fine. Like, everything is kind of okay. It just depends on what you feel like you're going to play against. And I think that that's really hard to pin down.
Is that exciting? Like, as someone who is preparing for this tournament, is this kind of openness something that has you jazzed up about playing it? Or is it just like a little frustrating where you can't really find a foothold?
I like it when there are go-to answers for things, but the problem with Pioneer and Explorer by extension is that it's severely missing a lot of those aspects. Where the reason that, I don't know, like polymorphing things is viable is that there's just not a ton of disruption and removal, and like the top end stuff is good, and people's clocks are slow, and it's like, you know, a format like Modern, it's like you have natural checks to kind of keep that stuff in place, whereas Pioneer and Explorer are very much just about finding the most messed up thing that you can do, and bonus points if it's a thing that people aren't very good at interacting with currently.
Yeah, we're looking for a hero to kind of boss around the format a little bit. I'm pretty confident it's going to be Monastery Swiftspear once that arrives. I think that's actually the missing piece that'll glue a lot of things together. But until then, you may as well have your fun and just go off, do the most busted thing possible.
Yeah, Mono Red's definitely lacking. The fact that for the longest time, they were like, oh, I guess we have to play like Torbrand Embercleave because a lot of the other cards just aren't here. And that is a combination that I think was a little bit overpowered for Standard compared to what we're used to, but is definitely underpowered in a format like this.
I would agree.
And the decks that you see now are just like, I'm playing Wizard's Lightning with like 4 wizards because I need instant speed removal for Greasefang. But it's like, you just cut the top end, you play a bunch of burn spells, and that is a better plan. And I like that list more, but I don't think it's good, and I think that it is missing some stuff. But Mono Red diehards, you can absolutely do it. Like, is Standy Dog going to qualify? Probably.
That's always a good bet.
What else you got for me, man? Any other questions? Any things that you were thinking of for Explorer where you're like, hey, why isn't my favorite deck playable or whatever?
Well, I've heard some buzz around Angels. Is that just false hype?
Angels is good and solid in a vacuum, not great in the context of the format.
Yeah.
Like, you have access to some copies of March, which gives you some instant speed removal, but for the most part, you have a pretty slow goldfish, and the stuff that you're doing doesn't line up all that well. Like, the polymorph decks mostly beat you, especially Asian and Treachery ones. You can, if you're left alone and get to 50 life and have a bunch of Valkyries, like, obviously Titan of Industry is not going to do much. So the Gruul matchup is a little bit better than Jeskai. And occasionally you can go bigger than Greasefang, which is pretty cool and interesting, but it's really hard to do if they have the combo on turn 3. I think it's pretty reasonably doable if they only combo you on turn 4. So you have that aspect. The problem is like, you're really good against aggro, right? You have like 1/4s and life gain and big blockers and whatnot. And
you have not mentioned an aggro deck in today's discussion.
Yeah, I mean, mono red, there was like some Gruul, like some humans, mono black when the format first started or whatever, good against Phoenix, but like these decks just mostly don't exist because of things like Greasefang. So is Angels actually what you're supposed to be doing? I don't think so. Like, you can jam it in best of 1 and hope to get your good matchups, and that can absolutely happen, right? But in like a 2-day tournament with some best of 3 or whatever, it's just not necessarily where I'd want to be.
One more question. I will tell you that I don't really care about the answer to this, but people always like this question. They like to know how to fix things. So if you could add any one card to this format to kind of like either solve the problems or just like smooth things out a little bit, is there something that is a glaring weakness right now for you that could just be fixed if there was only this one card in the mix?
Good 1-drop to pressure would be nice. So Swift Spear definitely checks a lot of boxes. I think that puts a different constraint on the format that people need to be aware of and prepare for. Things like, consider into Faithful Mending, probably shocking twice in between there. Like, obviously you're gaining some life back or whatever, but you're down some points, and then like Greasefanging them. A good mono red deck could just have you like dead on board on next turn, right? So I think Swift Spear goes a long way towards making things like Greasefang less viable, which would then make the format a little bit better. And this is basically what it takes. Like, we have Thoughtseize, which is interesting because it's like not in like a standard set or whatever, right? But like, since it was put into Historic, then it is legal in Explorer because it's there. So like, might as well. It's like very strange, but whatever.
Yeah, it's weird that like the first thing you do when you announce this format isn't just like make the 20 staples and sell it as an anthology and just take your guaranteed money from everyone.
Right. And even if it's not immediately, I mean, you might as well do it pretty soon, right? I would have hoped that it would be out by now.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know what it takes to actually put a set into production on Arena, but it seems like it should be very doable to make the 20 most important cards very quickly.
Yeah, I would think so too. But
yeah, you have to say, true. But I expect it's a financial choice. They think they can get more money by basically drip feeding it and not just like fixing the format right away.
Yeah, I could see that. But you even don't have to do 20, right? You can do like a normal Historic anthology where it's like 5 good ones and 10 stinkers or something.
Yeah, that's so hard to like what story are you telling with that? Like, it's so clear what you're doing. I guess everything they do is so clear. So like, why?
It's all face
why
up,
take
man.
them? Yeah, why take the mask off now? Fair enough.
And there hasn't been an anthology type of thing in a while. So also, you think that they would have just released one at some point. I mean, now they have alchemy stuff kind of slotting in as the in between sets sort of thing, but.
Yeah, how's that format doing? Did you see that tweet about the player numbers?
I did. I mean, that's the untapped user base, though, right? That's not all of Arena. And
sure, but it's got to be reflective of something, right? And also, like, the idea of alchemy is that it's for the most enfranchised players that solve formats too quick and they need something new to play. So who do you think is using trackers?
I don't think that that's true. I think alchemy is like Hearthstone, more fun, casual experience, like getting a story out of it sort of thing. I think it appeals to them too. I agree that they wanted alchemy to be like a backup Pro Tour format or whatever for when that problem happens. But I like, especially when that's not going to be the PTQ format, then why are those people playing alchemy? Like, it's just a bad idea. Then you're just not selling alchemy cards for 3/4 of the year.
Yeah.
You can't cater just to that player base.
I think
Or if you do, you have to run against it all the time.
Alchemy and Bad Idea might be somewhat intertwined
forever.
So.
They are. I think they are. But, neither here nor there. Anyway, yeah, surprised there's not an anthology. That's fine. At least it didn't drop like 2 days before the PTQ and like be legal.
True.
Because that would suck. But, we're in it where we are. Swiss Beer solved some problems. I don't know, just like more interaction, more disruption, hopefully stuff that's like stapled onto creatures or plays well in a creature deck, or, better late game stuff maybe. It's like if your Parhelion thing doesn't match up with what I'm doing on turn 5, then why even bother doing it? Because you might only do your thing on turn 4, like that kind of thing.
Man, that's a real accelerated pace where you're like,
I'm not saying it's good.
Yeah. Just take the format as you find it. Sure.
I don't know. For Pioneer, I would want it to be like really bad combos, and then like creature decks and control and mid-range, and I would ban the shit out of like Greasefang and Lotus Field and anything that is like stepping out of line,
Yeah, I think there's merit to being aggressive with the bans in that format.
And I think that would make for like a good format and would serve better as a place where like your old standard cards can go play versus now where it's like, well, your dual lands still have value, but certainly a lot of the stuff that you played in standard is outmoded.
Yep. They need a strategy around banning. They need a stated strategy. And I think like, I don't know, I see Pioneer as a good testing ground to be thoughtful about your bans, not destroy people's decks, not absolutely crater cards value, but carefully approach things. And sometimes you go after a secondary card to bring a deck back in line, so it has to do a slightly worse option, and that's enough. Like, that's all you really have to do.
Right. Yeah, I don't like the line that they're taking, but we definitely just have fundamental differences of what we want the format to look like, where they're like, no, we actually like that Dig and Cruise are legal because it gives the format an identity. And I'm just like, God damn it.
I mean, like, that statement, I appreciated that statement because at least it was clear in its goals.
Yes. I like that it was in there. So now we're not left wondering, like, why the hell is this still here?
Yeah. I think making those cards like format staples and the format being okay is a really, really big burden to bear, where you could just like make a good format instead and just like get rid of all that shit and routinely purge the format of that shit, and it would be way more interesting. But
Copter's too good because it goes into a lot of decks and homogenizes them, but every blue deck has a Dig or a Cruise, and you are incentivized to play blue because of Dig and Cruise in the same way that you'd be incentivized to play creatures because you have Smuggler's Copter. Like, I'm honestly, I'd be fine if both were legal, right? But being like, oh, we like Dig and Cruise, but we don't like Copter. Like, I also don't really like that all that much.
With you, 100%.
Format could use more creature decks, Although maybe you just play Copter in your Greasefang deck, and it's like, what have I done?
That is an unfortunate consequence, probably, that we are headed towards.
Fable the Mirror Breaker is like a 3-mana Copter anyway, so that's fine.
Yeah, fair enough. It does everything.
All right, man. I think that's it. I think you can get ready to go to work, I guess, because it's like 7.
Yeah. About to head off to the office. So good on you, mate. And we'll talk next week.
All right. How do they say game in Kiwi land?
All around the world, game is said exactly the same way, and that's game.
Good luck.